And that means, and a lot of the details are out there, that means that there were individuals, not necessarily organizations or even factions or departments, even within the heavily compartmented world of the CIA, where one office may not know what the office next door is doing and usually doesn't. But there were individuals in key positions who were able to give the necessary orders to make things happen, to facilitate the operation, and to facilitate their evasion. And I think what to me is almost indirect, is a classic but indirect proof, is the mainstream media, which is roughly 90 to 96%, depending on the numbers, Jewish or Zionist owned. And that depends on how you classify Rupert Murdoch. And it's what they didn't do. I mean, what they did do is something that I think you and those who have been in this many years longer than I have understand and have experienced more than I have. It was a combination of denial, back the official government case, or at least not viciously question it, distraction, direct attention away from Israel, away from the PNAC alumni, and ridicule. I mean, how can you, the conspiracy theorists, there they are, and of course Americans instinctively, once you say something is a conspiracy, our eyes glaze over. They really do. But the normal instinct, we need to understand that ever since the publication of the Pentagon Papers, way back 40-odd years ago, the normal instinct of the mainstream media, of the investigative dimension of the mainstream media, is to investigate and reveal. And the mainstream media did nothing. They effectively buried WTC-7. They buried most of the questions about it. They buried most of the arguments about it. The alternative media has carried it, but only intermittently do you see a blip come up on the mainstream media. The discussion, for example, of look at WTC-7 go down. Look at nanothermite in the dust. What about the hijackers? Most Americans don't know that. The media hasn't.
I got my 15 minutes of fame in the mainstream media when a bunch of state legislators in Wisconsin here came after me. But I wonder, though, to what extent could all of this media activity be directed by the Israeli Mossad?
I don't think it has to. I don't think it has to be directed. This is something that I think we in America, we forget that consensus is almost as effective as an open conspiracy. And my very strong sense, is that unless the owners of the networks, the major newspapers, unless they had either known, suspected, or feared that the evidentiary trail would lead in whole or in part back to Israel, there would have been an investigative feeding frenzy on the official government report. They would have ripped it to shreds because it cannot stand. And you don't have to be an investigative reporter to realize. You simply have to be literate. And they left it alone. They left it alone completely.
You're right, and I don't really disagree with you that much, but I need to, ask the hard question. So back in 1962, we had every member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff signing off on a 9/11-like plan to attack America and blame it on the Cubans and launch a war. How can you be so sure that with 9/11 we have sort of the Mossad tail wagging the American dog, rather than, let's say, Cheney and Rumsfeld, who had been running a secret government for a couple of decades at least, and their rogue network within the U.S. services sort of contracting out to Mossad or making a sort of an agreement with Mossad? In other words, could you imagine that it would be this American group being the prime movers and the Mossad simply helping them?
Well, you have to remember that Cheney and Rumsfeld were PNAC alumni.
Well, true, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that they're not in charge and that that Netanyahu's in charge.
I have never seen any evidence in any American government that at least since the days of John Kennedy and probably since the days of Dwight Eisenhower, that any American president has dictated to an Israeli prime minister what they would do rather than the reverse, or to one of their agencies.
That is strange, isn't it?
Isn't that interesting?
Right. Why do you think that is?
Yes. Money, money, money. And the last congressional letter was, 327 members signing a letter to Clinton saying, unrestricted support for Israel, attack Iran in Israel's behalf, and I think a comparable letter is running its way through the Senate. I haven't seen the number of signatories on it. A fellow named Alan Hart, who's a really bright, really decent guy. If you hasn't been on your show,
a couple months ago. Yeah,
he's really, really good guy. Had a paper just published just a few weeks back, I think, in which he pointed out. He said, among other things, something between 50 and 60% of the campaign contributions to all candidates, both parties, both houses of the Congress, are made either by Jewish political action committees, including AIPAC, or by Jewish individuals. And that's it. Money talks. And if that wasn't enough, all they have to do is look at the experience of people like Adlai Stevenson in Illinois, Paul Finley, Cynthia McKinney, to see what happens to people who cross them.
Well, it's one thing to cross them in Congress, but it's another thing to have a foreign country come and engineer this kind of spectacular attack on America, as you're suggesting happened on 9/11. Wouldn't the Israelis have seen this as a gamble that would have such possible negative consequences that they wouldn't want to go that far?
I recall a study that was published just a day or two before 9/11. It was done by the School for Advanced Military Studies at Fort Leavenworth, a student paper, and one of the comments was to describe Mossad as ruthless and cunning, capable of conducting attacks against Americans and making it appear as if the Arabs had done it.
That was an interesting coincidence.
Wasn't it?
But again, it's one thing to do that kind of attack in Lebanon, and blow up a bunch of Marines or something, which may or may not have been what happened there. And it would be another thing to be, blowing up the World Trade Center on live TV, killing thousands of people. It's just so big. And you were quoted as saying that you saw it as kind of an all or nothing gamble.
Yeah, I think it is. It's and part of it depends upon the character of the Israeli government, and that the fact that they had in the Bush administration in Washington an enormous number of like-minded people, of people who were theirs, some of them dual citizens. There is such a thing as a target of opportunity, and I think their gamble paid off. Their gamble has paid off. I was talking to someone, and I don't like to speculate. I think I've worked this through fairly carefully, and I'm still comfortable with my conclusion. I was talking to a friend yesterday evening about this on the net, and she said, "Well, do you have any idea what really how this unfolded?" He said, "Was it really just the Mossad?" And I said, if I was going to speculate. And Kevin, please be sure, this is speculation. Big capital letters, bold-faced, italicized. Not a conclusion. Okay, I'm not presenting this as the answer.
Okay.
Please be sure that's understood. But trying to reconcile the competing parts of this. And I said, the only thing that makes sense, that seems to make sense, before any type of a real detailed investigation of the people and the places, is that it was a double hijacking. Way back in the 80s, when I was friends with some Israelis, some senior Israelis, and I was having a session in Washington with a couple of Israeli colonels, and we were talking about their use of special operations forces, because I was interested in that as well, and from a military side, we were sort of paralleling what had happened, what the Soviets were doing in Afghanistan and so forth. And one of them made an observation